My name is Matthew. I don't really know how to start this off other than getting straight to the point. There is an incessant tapping noise in my apartment. For whatever reason, I can't seem to escape it. No matter where I am in the house, I always hear it around 3 a.m. I can sleep through most things, but my god, it is so fucking loud that I'm jolted awake and can't go back to sleep for the next few hours. I've tried everything, from listening to relaxing sounds or music on repeat with earphones to straight up earplugs and earmuffs. Even trying to soundproof my house with foam padding. My entire house is covered from ceiling tile to floorboard in foam. Well, mostly. But nothing seems to work. Quite frankly, I think I'm going insane. Aside from the pandemic and being locked indoors all the time because the city I live in is a public health hellscape, the tapping is just the icing on the proverbial shit cake that is my life. I can't leave because after getting really sick once, my entire immune system hasn't been the same since. Plus, it's not like I have anywhere else to go. Anyway, I don't remember exactly when the tapping started, just a few months between when I first moved into the apartment and when I got sick, which, if memory serves correct, was about last year. I know that's vague, but all the time that I have spent day after day in almost complete isolation really makes everything mold together, memory-wise. So, like I said, the noise would start up in the morning around 3 a.m. every morning like a demented alarm clock. It sounded like metal tapping against the other side of the plaster with a disjointed pattern. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's like a light but almost panicked knocking with either one or more fingertips. It would always jolt me awake and I'd be too startled and annoyed to get back to sleep. Now, normally I'm a heavy sleeper, but this always woke me up, even when I downed a NyQuil or a couple chugs of Jack before bed. Needless to say, I would be exhausted when I have to go to work in the morning. I've been late a couple times because of it. The weird thing is that I'm not exactly sure where it's coming from. Most of the time when I'm in my room, I'd hear it in the wall next to me, the other side being the bathroom. So, my first thought was just that the pipes were making weird noises. The building I live in is fairly old and has been updated a couple of times before 2020, but not everything. I spoke with my landlord and she had a plumber to come by and look at the pipes. Nothing came of it. Still, it persisted. After the third or fourth night, I tried sleeping in the living room, then the office room, then my kitchen, the bathtub, and even in the hallway. Nothing worked. And, like I said, I don't even know if it's even coming from the same place. It was always in the wall adjacent to me. Anywhere I was, the tapping would seemingly follow. Like, if I moved from my bedroom to a different room, I would still hear it in the room I came from. But it would stop, then it would start up again a few minutes later next to me. Wherever there was a wall, the sound somehow emanated from it. That's not even the weirdest thing. Whenever I would awake to the sound, there was always a smell that hung in the air, like burnt, rotten steak and wet fur. It was faint, but it was there, blanketing the entire apartment in a putrid stench. It kind of reminded me of my hometown when the blood plant was still in operation. Made the whole town stink for the longest time till it was shut down after legal proceedings. At least that smell was only half as bad as this one. Seemed to permeate the air like a fog, no matter where I was in the house. When it first started, I was scared that it was a gas leak in the building, but the landlord assured me that it was not. I guess I believed her because the smell would eventually dissipate after a while, seemingly after the tapping had ceased for the night. At first, I was fairly certain that it's just a coincidence, but after nearly a year of this happening, you'd notice the apparent pattern too. But something different happened last night. Now, I don't normally dream. Most of the time, it's just nothing, at least nothing that I can ever remember. When I do, it's usually not any particular subject. It's usually chaotic, messy, weirdly erotic, horrifying, and generally just doesn't make any lick of sense or reason. One dream that has stuck with me fairly recently was one where I was standing at my workplace, just a run-of-the-mill gas station, while operating a typewriter instead of a register and endlessly typing in a series of gibberish and numbers that had no obvious pattern. Mind you, I have no idea how to operate a typewriter. Just then, a man with a fish for a head, like the reporter fish from SpongeBob, comes into the store wearing a tailored suit and a top hat. He spun a cane in one hand as he made his way to the counter, tap dancing on his way over to me. He stops in front of the counter, bowing and taking his hat off in greeting. "Cheerio, mate. How the goats doing?" The strange fish-headed gentleman said in a high-pitched Australian accent. Before I could even answer, a giant black blur suddenly swooped down as I heard a speeding "Ma" as the fish-headed man's head was sheared clean off of his body, leaving it still standing somehow. Blood splattered the counter from above, and I looked up at an impossibly tall, vaulted ceiling with over a dozen giant, goat-headed bats hanging from the banisters, all bleeding and shrieking as the one that took the fishman's head casually munched on it. Just then, the body in front of the counter sprouts a new head, this time a duck, and the hat slowly floats back onto his head. He simply quacks once and backflips away and out of the store, leaving me to continue typing in the Fibonacci sequence for seemingly no reason. That's about as far as I remember with that one. I think there were boobs involved at one point when my brain attempted to conjure up a wet dream, but I digress. Last night I had a dream that was very different. To say different is kind of an understatement. As I said before, my dreams are primarily just all over the place and never really focusing on one thing at a time. This time, however, did in fact only focus on one thing, and only that one thing. A door. Just a simple, old, rusty, dusty, run-of-the-mill wooden door. A door that you would imagine a castle dungeon would have. Wrought iron facets with bolts, rusted at the hinges, and looking rather solid as it did ancient. There was a crow's head knocker in the middle of the door, cast in the same blackened, rusted iron, arched with a point at the top. Nothing about it ever really stood out about it, just that in my dream state, I would just stand a few feet in front of it, just looking at it, as if waiting for something to happen. Of course, I could never tell if I was supposed to open it or wait for it to open on its own. Another thing to note about this door is that it wasn't against a wall or had anything near it. It was as if standing or floating against a void space, not even a frame to border it. The only light source was the door itself, glowing with a pale blue and gray shade. No light from the other side peeking through the cracks. All was quiet. Nothing but me and the door. Something about it did feel really off, however. Like, very off. I can't quite put in the words of the very sense of wrongness the door gave off. Was it foreboding, ominous, evil? I honestly can't convey the aura of dread that gripped me like a vice being near it in this dream. Dreams are normally how the brain processes memories and information, either from the previous day or further in the past, plucking random segments and recreating an augmented reality, playing out the scenarios like a film reel. But no matter how hard I search through my mind, I can't remember where I've seen this door before. And I know I've never seen it before. It feels like it was copied and pasted into my dream, planted into my head. They say that dreams can have certain meanings, or at least convey things that are in your mind. Falling into an endless pit conveys anxiety or perhaps depression. Flying means a newfound freedom. Running in place or punching something with no strength behind it can mean lost sense of control and stability. Being chased by a monster means running away from your responsibilities or something. I'm no psychologist or expert on the subject matter of dreams and nightmares, but what the fuck does staring at a door that I've never seen before mean? Then the door opened. Just a crack, the ancient hinges squealing and the boards shuddering. I felt paralyzed. The dread intensified and the air felt colder than usual, freezing me in place. After what felt like an eternity, a gloved hand with fingers that seemed too long slowly reached around the opening like a spider crawling from its hiding place, slowly opening the door further and sent the hinges squealing once again as my heart pounded in my chest, waiting and dreading to see who and what was on the other side. Then I woke up. At that moment, I don't know what scared me more, the door from the dream or the utter silence that greeted me. I sat up, heart leaping in my chest. I clapped my hands once. My ears were fine. The tapping wasn't there. None on the walls, not even in my head. I heard nothing. I had grown so used to it at this point that the very absence of it left me with a grave sense of unease. I looked over at the time on my alarm clock, glowing an ominous red in the darkness. 2:58 a.m. I felt my breath catch in my chest. I sat there, almost bewildered. The sense of unease grew as time seemed to move slowly. I've never woken up before 3 a.m. Normally I'd see this as merely a coincidence, maybe my body just expecting it, and I woke up from the sensory signals in my brain. 2:59 a.m. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm just jumping to conclusions. I didn't know what to think as I stared at the clock, waiting for the time to arrive. Time marched slowly, slower than it should have. Time is relative, though, so of course it's going to tick by slowly as I'm staring at the time to change. Of course, what the fuck was I so worried about? Am I paranoid something's gonna happen? What the hell's going on? 3 a.m. Silence. After a moment, I breathed in finally. I don't know whether it was relief or something else. I kept looking at the time, the only source of light in the room at that moment. Then, it hit me. The stench of burnt, rotting meat and hair washed over the room like a tidal wave. It was so strong that I nearly lost my supper the night prior as I gagged, sputtering to myself in audible exasperation. Matthew. I froze. It sounded like the creak of a barn door or sand on the wind. My breath caught in my throat out of instinct. Then there's the creak on the floor. Then another, and another, slowly inching, hobbling, stumbling towards my bed. I look up slowly. I didn't see anything at first, but the more my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the more my heart raced with fear. A huge, skeletal but hulking shadow stumbled towards me. I couldn't make out any details, but it had to have been almost 9 or 10 feet tall, as it had to still crouch down slightly as its shoulders touched the ceiling. I did hear something else dragging across the floor, like pieces of jagged-edged metal catching on the wood. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Everything in my brain was going off all at once, silently panicking as to what to do. Do I run? Do I hide? There was literally nothing that I could do at that moment. I just helplessly watched the thing in front of me, walking towards me, backing up into the headboard in a feeble attempt to get away from the shadowy demon thing as it came closer. Then it stopped in front of the bed and leaned over. If I wasn't already terrified, I was sure scared shitless by now. The stench was overwhelming by then, but now in the dim red light of my alarm clock, I could now partially make out the hideous thing's features. And the smell was the least of my worries. It was like looking at the face of death and terror itself. A wolf skull with patches of burnt, decaying skin, some peeling and hanging by strands and sinew, loomed before me. Most of the skin was gone as far as I could tell, for what skin was left was tightly stretched over the tattered muscle and decaying flesh. The gums were gone, only a permanent grisly grin across its canine-like maw. There were still eyes that were large and mirror-like with a milky hue as they reflected the red light of my alarm clock, basking the ghoul in a blood-red light. Now that it was so close to me, I could barely breathe for fear of my life. Then, it spoke, its jaws moving to barely utter the word. Matthew. It was barely even loud enough to be a whisper. That same raspy, decayed, and ancient voice like a stone grinding grain to flour. It spoke my name. I almost couldn't fathom what I was even hearing. It spoke my name. It knew my name. Please, don't be afraid. It backed away slightly, out of the red light that had illuminated its grotesque visage, rising back up to obscure itself in the shadows. I will protect you. All I could do was stare up at the creature before me as it spoke. Questions went through my head. Protect me? Protect me from what? It continued, its voice almost breaking, exhaling from lungs that had long since withered, uttering sounds from a parched, dry throat. Don't believe his lies. I didn't understand. A million questions went through my head and none were answered. I stared up at this thing to continue talking, but just as suddenly that the thing had appeared in my room, I woke once again. Somehow I had ended up on the floor next to my bed as I gasped for air, my face lying in a small puddle of saliva. My head ached and I winced at the small wound in my forehead as I touched the dried blood. I must have passed out, either from fright or air deprivation, hitting my head on the way down on the bedside table and knocking the lamp over. Groaning, I got up slowly and held my head as it throbbed. Thoughts raced through my head. What the hell happened last night? Was it real? Was it a dream? A nightmare? I thought about the events in sequence with the best of my memory. The door opens. Wake up. 3 a.m. A fucking demon visits. Cryptic message. Wake up again with a sore, blood-caked forehead after evidently falling unconscious and hitting the side table, and finally, waking on the floor hours later. I'd gotten into a crouching position before pulling my racked body off the floor, groaning and hissing in pain. Joints in my neck and back cracked as I stood up straight, looking up at the ceiling. After one last loud crack of many joints, I let out a sigh of relief. I exhaled loudly as well. What a fucking night, I exclaimed to myself as I groaned again and take a seat on the bed before laying back down to ease my still screaming nerves. My head still throbbed from the less-than-mortal wound. Thank God I didn't bleed on the floor, otherwise I wouldn't be here. I lay there for a while, letting my aching muscles relax. My mind eventually wandered to the cryptic message that my late-night visitor from hell had said to me, and what it could have possibly meant. I will protect you. Don't believe his lies. Please don't be afraid. I wasn't sure what to think of those words at the moment. Was it solace in the fact that it had evidently only come to deliver a message? Or was it dread for the very same reason? And how did the thing know my name? I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew me somehow, as if there was a familiarity it had with me. I shook my head. No, that wasn't real. You're just sleep-deprived and had a waking nightmare. That's it. You need to do stuff today. Those dishes won't clean themselves. I told myself as I held my head, still laying down. Eventually I got up from the bed, groaning still from the aching, not paying much attention as I closed my eyes, still holding my head, only relying on my familiarity with the room as I shuffled my way around the end of the bed towards the door. I figured some ibuprofen would do the trick, but before I could do so, my foot catches splinters on the floor. My eyes shot open and I exclaim in pain as I lose my balance, tumbling to the floor. I nearly missed my dresser, but my head throbbed once more as I made contact with the floor. And so did my big toe now, as I could see I had a pretty good-sized splintered piece of floor sticking out of it. It bled a little as it had sunk itself pretty deep. I hissed in pain as I held my foot to get a good look at it before attempting to pull the piece out. My toe seemed to protest as it throbbed. What a fucking morning! I growled as I held my breath and grabbed the piece of wood and yanked it out as hard as I could. It came out easily enough, the pain neurons shooting up my spine to my brain like a shot of lightning as I grimaced, hissing in pain. Fuck! Ow! My toe bled a bit more profusely now, trickling down my foot and creating a small puddle on the floor. I groaned, still wincing in pain as I picked out stray bits of wood that were left behind by the big splinter. By the time I finished, my toe stopped bleeding and the blood had coagulated at the wound, the trickle along the sole of my foot drying up as well. The tips of my index finger and thumb were painted deep red. At the time, I really didn't need blood all over the floor if I had decided to go to the bathroom. So, there on the floor of my bedroom I sat, probably looking like a lunatic with my disheveled, messy hair, and only wearing boxers with blood in the respective areas. Hey, at least it's all in one spot. After my little procedure, I leaned back on the dressers, taking a breather. Not for long, of course. The knobs of the drawers were cold and obviously not very comfortable to lean against. I leaned back up, my eyes closed as my head and foot still throbbed in pain. I've heard of waking up on the wrong side of the bed, but this was ridiculous. Gonna need a lot more ibuprofen today. Finally, I opened my eyes after a bit, breathing in deeply in an attempt to ease the pain. I stared ahead at nothing in particular, neither thinking of anything in particular at that moment, more or less just processing the events that had just transpired even further. Bad dream, hit head, got up, searing pain in toe, giant splinter from floor, remove, sitting. It was at that moment that my eyes drifted to the floor, and my heart skipped a beat. I squinted, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. I knew that the wooden portions of the floor of this apartment were shitty, not the most well-maintained, and only certain parts had ever gotten attention over the years. So it was expected to have possibly gotten a splinter one of these times. But as I looked at the distinct markings on the floor, left behind by what I could only assume the worst, however, the notion that it was just a hallucination from sleep deprivation or a waking nightmare suddenly fell away like a facade, leaving me dazed, confused, and outright horrified. There on the floor in front of me, evenly spaced among the splintered and jagged valleys of wood flooring, were 3 distinct clawed-like markings. A couple feet were pretty much the same, starting from seemingly in the middle of the bedroom and stopping just before the foot of my bed. Between the sets of markings were also paw-like prints, barely set into the wood like sand or mud. Claw marks were also present, puncturing tiny holes and scraping into the floor where they made contact with each step. The pattern was uneven, barely in a straight line before the prints stopped where the claw marks ended as well. From what I could tell, there were no other traces of the thing that left them there. That damnable demon, my nighttime visitor, my new moon messenger, it had gone where it stood last, stooped under the ceiling, watching me, speaking to me. And just like that, it was gone, leaving only the marks on the floor by heavy, hellish claws. I can only imagine the stench now. Something of a memory of that putrid, acrid scent that lingered even when it wasn't present. I kept staring at the floor for some time, the minutes ticking by at a snail's pace as I weighed out my options. To either run out into the halls of the building, screaming like a madman, or to accept my apparent fate. Either way, this mess on the floor is more than likely going to cost me my deposit. Hey there, it's the narrator speaking. Thank you so much for watching today. Today's story is to be continued. If you like this one and want to see the future adaptations of the series, as well as for other stories, you should subscribe to Sable Nature and hit the bell button below to be notified of future releases. It'd also be great if you left a like and shared the video. Thanks again, and I'll see you again real soon.